and welcome to season 4 of Queer Talks. Queer Talks is brought to you by the Canadian Embassy in Bhutan. I'm delighted and honored to be inviting Minister and Deputy High Commissioner for Canada in India and the Deputy Head of Mission in Nepal and Bhutan, His Excellency Stewart Wheeler, and his partner, Brian Armstrong, to this episode of Queer Talks.
Well, thank you very much, Namgay. It's so wonderful to be here today with you. Brian and I are really looking forward to our conversation.
Stewart, Your Excellency, is a highly decorated diplomat. So when I saw your CV, I mean, of course, it's a very impressive CV, but what really impressed me was is this line, is my favorite bit in your bio. Stewart is accompanied on postings by his partner, Brian, and together they are proud to be an out gay diplomatic couple. So, I mean, have you always had this on your bio? And since when have you been an out gay diplomatic couple?
That's a good question. I guess we've been an out gay diplomatic couple ever since we've been together, since our first posting. But it is an interesting question to say, since when have I had it on my bio? Because as you're progressing in your career as a diplomat, people don't ask you for your bio until you've reached certain positions where you're speaking in public or attending things. So I guess it's only been the last 10 years or so, particularly when we were posted to Iceland, where I was Canada's ambassador to Iceland. There, everyone asks for your bio, so we started making that conscious choice to say that out loud. But I think we've been, we've never been secretive. We've always been out to our colleagues, my colleagues in the office, in our embassies. But it's always a bit of a paradox when you're a rotational foreign service officer and you're getting posted as a diplomat to different places, because some places around the world have full legal diplomatic recognition of same-sex spouses, and some don't. And some have very open and progressive and welcoming, inclusive societies, and some don't, and some are on their way towards that. And those aren't always mixed. We were on posting, our first posting together was in Colombia, where Brian had full recognition. Colombia had a very advanced legal situation at the time. However, as a predominantly Catholic country, it was not as widespread and welcomed in greater society. There was an LGBT community. There were organizations that we at the embassy were working with, but it wasn't as openly visible in society. Whereas after Colombia, we were posted to London, very progressive, welcoming, open UK society. But because we weren't legally married, Brian didn't have diplomatic recognition and diplomatic status in the UK. So sometimes it's different depending on what the legal situation is or what the societal situation is. But I think in all places we've never hidden the fact that we're proud to be a couple together on the world stage for Canada.
What has your experience been like, Brian? I mean, you have almost like you exist in a fluid state following Stewart around. So sometimes you're like, oh yeah, the official partner. And then other days you're like, okay, what are you? So what has that experience been like over the years?
Yeah, it's been interesting. When we first met, I never imagined myself living abroad so extensively over the years. There's definitely been some challenges. You go to a new place. Our first posting in Colombia, I'd never lived outside Canada. I didn't speak the language. So we arrived there, and Stewart is a fluent Spanish speaker. He goes off to work, and I really can't communicate with the service sector. Just getting around to do basic stuff like get groceries and try and order food. So it's been complicated in some places for sure. And it's not, depending on, my status where we go, it's not always easy to work, in the local environment. But the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges for sure.
What are the benefits?
Getting to see the world, getting to meet new people from all over the world. We've made great friends in the diplomatic community when we've been abroad. We've also made some incredible friends, local friends. Our experience in Iceland was, we had a wonderful quality of life there. We met. We met one couple in the first couple of months that we were there that welcomed us, introduced us to the gay mafia of Reykjavik, and we had this instant circle of friends, which just made our time there memorable. We ended up meeting an Indian woman from Karnataka who married an Icelander and had a family there, and we became really close with them. So experiences like that, just you carry them with you. They last a lifetime. It's been amazing.
I think it's true too that even in places where or at periods in our time together as diplomats, as my career, the networking and the connections with the local LGBTQ community have really been important almost everywhere we've been. We had lots of gay friends in Colombia. We worked with local organizations, but it wasn't as big an element of our day-to-day lives. In London, there was lots of professional networking, and we met some really senior role models for me, and worked very closely with British people and internationals that were working to advance the dialogue on LGBTQ rights. Even when I was in Afghanistan, I helped found a small group of like-minded diplomats who found themselves in Afghanistan away from their families. Nobody in Afghanistan was posted with families, so Brian wasn't allowed to be there, not because we're gay, but because the situation in the country at the time, no one was posted there with families. And so we found family among the community, but also were able to connect to local community. And the same thing, in Iceland and in London, the community that you find, the families that you create through the LGBTQ community, even that we're finding here in India as well, are really rich and bring something that we find we benefit from in our time in my career that's unique to this community.
It's wonderful to hear that from you, Stuart, as well as Brian, how when you find yourself in isolating situations, experiences, you try and build that community around yourself. So that becomes one way of overcoming a challenge that you may encounter being queer, right? What could be, like, how have you overcome other challenges? I mean, there was a diplomatic challenge too, where Brian was allowed to accompany you in Afghanistan more for security measures than for anything else. What about other challenges in your life as a couple? I mean, like I was saying, we've not had a reference point like the two of you here in Bhutan. So I would definitely like to pick on your experience personally and professionally so that it can become like an example for people who are queer here to aspire towards. So what other challenges have you been able to overcome that we may not be aware of or were very unique to the two of you?
Maybe I'll do the personal side.
Yeah, sure. Brian.
We've been together for 23 and a half years now. We met in the summer of 2000. I grew up in the far north of Canada, living in small communities most of my life. And I went to university. I went back to Yellowknife to work for the public service after I finished university. And Stewart was living in Ottawa at the time, he was the press secretary for our head of state. So she was coming north to to the Northwest Territories on her first official visit. I was working at the legislature, and my boss was organizing the visit. So I volunteered, and my first assignment for that visit was to go pick up the Governor General's press secretary at the airport.
And he definitely picked me up.
It was
love at first
destiny.
sight. It was love at first sight for him. And no, then I ended up, we were doing the long distance things for a bit. I ended up in Ottawa for a couple of months working. That had already been planned out. And then while I was there, I was able to line up a job in Ottawa, and eventually quit my job in the north, moved to Ottawa, and started working there. So we were there together for basically 4 years before we ended up going on our first posting. But it was a very different time in both of our lives. I didn't come out until I was 30. I didn't figure it out until then. Stewart figured it out much earlier at university. He had just come out of a long-term relationship. I was just entering the dating scene. And so when we met, it was, we were in very different places. So that was a challenge. I had all these ideas, what I thought a relationship to be, all these expectations, which, I look back on, and it's just like, they were so irrelevant. I guess. So, I was immature, but we, and even when I got down to Ottawa, it was an adjustment for both of us. He had a job that he was away half the time. Even when he was around, he was working in the evenings. I had to build my own life there. So it was just kind of those struggles of being in different places at different times, but then just trying to work together to find a path. There were bumps in the road the first 10 years of relationship.
Once you get over 10 years, you're good for life.
Thank you. I will keep that in mind. I think it's like such a great relationship advice for all relationships.
This is the thing, these are maybe challenges that are exacerbated by the additional challenge of getting to be comfortable with yourself and with what you've decided. You've come to the realization of how you want to live your life and who you are in that life. And so that adds obviously additional challenges to an LGBTQ relationship. But the challenges of being a couple I think are universal. And we all go through those as we explore, what it is to have a loving relationship. On the professional side, and I think this would also apply not just to diplomats, but many young people these days are looking for international careers, looking to work abroad, study abroad. They have connections. The social media world has connected us to life in other parts of the globe that in a way that's very different than when we were growing up. But in the diplomatic corps, you've got to be constantly thinking about where your next posting is. But of course, a straight couple or a single diplomat doesn't have the added challenge of, what will the legal status of my partner be? Will this be a place where we can be safe? Is this a place where we could bring children if we had children? How would if we were two daddies with a child, taking them to a local school, how would the child be treated in the local school? So there's a whole layer of challenges for gay diplomats, and I would say gay couples that are living abroad or traveling abroad, or wanting to establish a life where they're coming and going. There are challenges around visas, around recognition, around legal status, around expectations in different countries. So those are all uh, those are all important. And I think, as we were saying before, reaching back into the community and identifying a support network, realizing where your resources are, where you can find out information, connecting to communities, whether they're at home or a broader international community, is always a great source of advice. Um, and then I'd say the other thing, and this may be also, for professional couple, or couples that are in a professional situation, um, you're constantly asking yourself, um, do I have to come out to every social interaction? We're going to a work event, or we're invited to an activity at another embassy. If we walk around this event together, then everyone's going to ask, well, are you colleagues? Are you friends? Do you both work at the embassy? And so every personal interaction becomes a coming out, becomes, the sense that you somehow feel that you have to educate people. And I think that weight of embodying social change, especially when it's early on in the social change in a society, that can be really heavy on people, and that can weigh on their mental health. And so I think one also has to be careful with oneself, and realize that you don't have to have that mantle of societal activist 24 hours a day every day, because that's going to wear you down. And so you can choose sometimes to be a little bit more anonymous, to take a bit of that pressure off. Um, Brian often found, when we were preparing for our posting here, he was kind of reflecting on, when we go to big events, and we introduce, in modern Canadian conversation, uh, we would say, he's my partner. We wouldn't say boyfriend, and they used to say life partner, and that sounds a little too hippie 1960s. So we just say partner. But many times when you're in a diplomatic environment, and you're going around an event, or in a host country, and you say, he's my partner, then they think, oh, you're business partners. What kind of business do you have? And so it just creates all of these more complicated conversations. And so he just decided, just call me your husband. Even though we're not married, by Canadian standards, we're what's called a common law couple. So we're de facto married. So we have all of the same rights and obligations of a married couple under Canadian law. So we may as well just use the short form for that, husband. And then everybody will understand. And sometimes that stops the conversation, and sometimes that creates a more interesting conversation.
I can imagine. But what you were alluding to about, a queer friend of mine actually told us to me in one of our conversations, he was telling me how it's so exhausting every day. People think you've come out, and you've come out for life. It's like automatically, like, I mean, straight people like me, we don't have to go around saying, oh, I'm straight. And, like, it's almost like it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday affair, like how you were saying in the social gatherings. So I can imagine just how exhausting that is. But that also reminded me of your role as the LGBTIQ plus champion of Global Affairs Canada. So you're saying, okay, you don't have to carry that mantle of being a social activist every day. But then when you have that as a title for yourself, as a responsible role, how do you stop being a social activist? I mean, how? Because you're that person too, right? So how is that not 24/7? How do you switch it off and say, oh, today I'm not going to be an activist. I'm
Well,
just going to be pure. What is that? So how do you do that?
I guess by the time you get to that point, that role is part of who you are, and I think for me that was a real honor. I've just finished being the champion. We've got a new champion of the ministry, although I'll continue to be very active in what's called the Pride Network at Global Affairs Canada. But that's a role which is really about building community, helping the community and the network to advocate for systemic change to challenges that they're facing, so that every employee in Global Affairs Canada, and that's our foreign ministry. So all of the employees at headquarters and in every embassy we have all around the world can feel comfortable that they can bring their full selves to work and be authentic and present themselves in a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment. But all throughout my career, there have always been mentors and coaches and people that I've known who have helped me to understand the rules of the road, how to navigate the system when our rights weren't entrenched, how to prepare for postings when there wasn't where our ministry wasn't providing information to all foreign service officers about what's the situation in this country versus that country. So I sort of felt it was my responsibility as someone who had benefited from that informal network and that informal community of help among gay diplomats to give back to the community and help to institutionalize some of those things. So now we have inside our system, we have an ongoing survey of all of our embassies that keeps track of the quality of life and the legal quality of life index of every country where we have embassies around the world. And that information is now online and available to all our diplomats. So when they're thinking about a posting in one country versus the next, they can look and see what's the situation for my family there. What will the healthcare situation be? What will the accreditation be for my partner? What will the legal situation be? Do I have to worry about walking down the street and getting shouted out at, or is it going to be a more welcoming society? So we done a lot of work inside our department, and it was a lot of fun to do events and activities that brought people together. I was the LGBTQI champion during the COVID crisis, and it actually was a moment where we realized that the network itself had been very, very much focused on the people who were at home in Ottawa. And what we realize is really our network is global, and it's all the people at all of our embassies around the world. And because we all of a sudden had platforms like this, where we could do online events and bring people together from all our missions around the world, it was actually helped us build and strengthen our community. So I feel like it was a really meaningful part of my career, and I'll continue to be active that way, even though I'm not the designated champion anymore. I will always be a personal champion.
Right, because that is who you are. But Brian, from the conversation that I've heard so far, I'm hearing about also mental health challenges. When I hear this, like the kind of challenges you face as a queer couple and you have to overcome, it requires a great deal of resilience. So Brian, like how have you dealt with that? I mean, because when you talk about being queer, I mean, for me, because I'm also a mental health advocate, it's so important. Like, how do you take care of yourselves? You've talked about all the external resources, right? So, but how do you take care of yourself?
I mean, we've been very fortunate, both of us, from the beginning. When we came out, we've always had the love and support of our parents, of our siblings. And our friends. I mean, moving around a lot and living abroad, obviously, presents challenges. You're in a new place, you're adapting, you're, trying to make new friends and meet people in the community. But we've also been very fortunate that everywhere we've gone, we've really rarely gone home during a posting. All of our family and friends have come to us on a very regular basis. So we've been blessed in that way. Just we've always had visitors. We've always had people who wanted to spend time with us. And it's been an experience for me, just moving around so much, learning about living in a new place, trying to learn a new language, which I'm terrible at, but making the best of it, realizing that you have this privilege of traveling with my partner who's working abroad, but just trying to take advantages of where you are and the people you meet, the experiences you're going to have, but also, yeah, taking some time to just reflect on your own personal growth and what you want to do, and yeah, taking care of your mental health, which isn't always easy to do when you're far away from family and friends.
Stuart, you touched upon this a little while earlier, but if you could explain to an unfamiliar audience about what it means to be recognized legally as a couple. I mean, if you could tell us what that means in Canada.
Sure. It hasn't always been this way. And I read that Bhutan made that first huge step of decriminalization in 2021. I think it was. In Canada, homosexuality was decriminalized in 1969. So on my first birthday, the country finally decriminalized it. Maybe they knew I was coming. But I also say that because it's a long arc of progress. It doesn't happen overnight. And just because the law changes doesn't mean that all of the regulations and all of the things that flow from law don't change overnight. It wasn't until 1969 homosexuality is decriminalized. It wasn't until 1995 that our Supreme Court finally ruled that the definition of equality inside our Constitution included sexual orientation. Until 1995, it was still legal for employers to discriminate against homosexual people, for landlords to kick people out if they found out. So there were, just because it wasn't criminal and the government wasn't, arresting people, didn't necessarily mean that society had caught up and really understood that. And I think there's a lot of change that happens by having proud and courageous role models stepping out and speaking up. I was really happy to read about is it Tashi Chumbal?
Miss Bhutan, our first, yes.
Miss Bhutan.
Miss
I mean,
Bhutan.
that's a huge role model, as a very high profile figure that people. Miss Bhutan, that's something people aspire to. That's something that's seen as a real achievement. So, we've in the early days, once once discrimination was outlawed in the 1990s, that's when I was on my first posting in Washington, D.C. With my first partner. And even then, when it became legal, my employer, the Department of Foreign Affairs at the time, still wasn't, convinced that they wanted to, rock the boat and ask the United States, who didn't recognize gay rights at the time, so they came to me and said, well, do you still want us to ask the United States for recognition for your partner? And I said, of course. Because that also meant that once my employer recognized my partner, and now obviously does, that means that my partner's covered by my healthcare insurance plan. It means that when if I pass on, then my pension continues for my partner, where we have that same recognition as if we were married. It means for many, it took a long time and a lot of pain through the AIDS crisis in the 1990s, where partners of people who were affected by AIDS and were in hospital weren't recognized by hospital authorities to allow them to come in and make decisions about the medical situation of their partners. And maybe they'd been together for 20, 30 years, but they weren't accepted by their families, or they weren't accepted by law. They weren't accepted by the hospital administration. So when it came down to making really life and death decisions about someone's care, a lot of LGBTQ people were being thrown out and put aside, and the family would swoop in and say, I'm going to make the decisions. You don't no one recognizes this person, taking their possessions, all sorts of things. So there's once decriminalization happens, there's a whole bunch of layers of what has to happen next, and the community needs to work together to prioritize which are the ones that they want to work on. Is it education? Is it public education? Is it healthcare? Is it what are the challenges that people face? We were posted in Iceland, where very progressive, very modern society. We felt very comfortable. We had lots of gay friends, very open. But we learned that only one generation before, Iceland had been a very homophobic, closed place. But because it was a small society, once there were some role models and once there were some people that people recognized, it very soon became clear in such a small population that everybody knew somebody in their family or in their extended group of friends. And then it becomes almost more real for people, for a society. Once they can see that LGBTQ community is not just some faceless, nameless group of people who are asking for rights. These are actual neighbors and friends and doctors and nurses and teachers and, the person you buy your bread from or you buy your newspaper from, or people that you see every day, and they have lives and they have partners and they have, they should be free to love who they want, and that doesn't affect other people. But all of those things take time for people to become used to. So it took a long time for the definition of equality to change. Same-sex marriage didn't happen until 2005 in Canada. It wasn't until 2017 that our Human Rights Act was updated to protect gender identity and gender expression. So trans people can finally feel like they too are fully included. It wasn't until last year or year before last, 2022, that conversion therapy was banned. There were still parts of the country where medical professionals were trying to beat the gay out of the gay. There's always going to be progress, and it's not always going to be linear. Sometimes you take a step forward, and then governments change, leadership changes. Look at the retreats on LGBTQ rights in the United States under certain administrations. It's not always going in the same direction. Luckily for us, we have a government that's very inclusive and very progressive and feminist, international assistance policy that has empowered us at embassies to be working with NGOs and civil society all around the world to build solidarity and advance LGBTQ rights everywhere in the world, and that's part of. We have the very first national LGBTQ action plan that our government only released 2 years ago. So it takes a long time before these things become kind of mainstreamed in society. But it's the support of the community and working together that gets you through the times when it's more challenging.
Thank you for sharing all that and for making us understand very briefly what it means to have legal status and the progress that Canada has made. There's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but then you have to keep at it. So finally,
Absolutely.
Stuart and Brian, maybe Brian, is there a message for people who are watching?
It's, everyone's experience is going to be different, but, you just, and everyone's family is going to be different. You just kind of need to try and be your authentic self. And I would say as much as it's different in different cultures, I guess. You don't try and live your life for your parents or for your siblings or for your friends, because they're not always going to be there. You need to find happiness within yourself. You need to find a life that you're happy with. And as scary as it can be, because I was terrified when when I finally was ready to come out and figured it out. Once it was such a relief once I told my parents and my siblings and my friends, and the people that love you are always going to love you. They're always going to be there. My friends are super supportive, and so our families have been over the years. Um, so, but just take your time and don't be rushed to try and, figure things out all at once, because you won't. It's going to take time. And yeah, just as you, and especially, we've been together a long time now, but we've just slowly, each of us has matured. We've grown together as a couple. It hasn't always been easy, but we've been together for so long. We know that we share the same values, that, love and respect and kindness are important, and that's the foundation of our relationship and who we are. And so I can't, I can't imagine my life without Stewart. It's we've just, we've had this incredible adventure together. It's a great, incredible journey. It's not over. We're still going to do more. But I would say, yeah, just be, don't expect to have it all right away. Just be patient, do the work, and you'll get there.
That's so beautiful,
I don't
Brian.
think I can add anything to that. That sounds pretty amazing. Yeah, it's the only other thing I would say, as I mentioned before, support each other in the community, look for your allies and your mentors and your role models, build each other up, and just remember that even though you may feel like you need a role model, and you'll find those people, and you can draw strength from their example, but everyone is a role model. There is somebody that's looking up to you, and it may just be your nieces and nephews, your the little kids in your neighborhood. I think you have to keep in mind that you're a role model for somebody out there, and I think we all need role models, and we need support of each other, especially as a community is growing and working on being more visible, and working together to expand their rights and their livelihoods and their abilities to have positive, fulfilling lives in the community. So.
Thank you so much. This conversation was very enlightening. Also pulled at my heartstrings. I felt very teary-eyed at some moments when you were sharing your personal story. I think this is going to be so inspiring. It's going to move so many of us here. And I mean, this is actually watched by a lot of people outside of Bhutan as well. We haven't kept track of who they are, what their identities, which countries they belong to, but it really does go global. Thank you so much, Your Excellency Stewart, for sharing all of this. Thank you so much, Brian. I look at the two of you and I think how inspiring as individuals, as a couple, and thank you for being such champions for each other. I don't know if you've ever looked at each other as being champions for each other, but the conversation I've had with the two of you, I think you're such great champions for each other, and I love that. And I hope you keep doing that. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on Queer Talk.